Hey guys, welcome back to Critical Flick. Today I'm reviewing All Quiet on the Western Front, now streaming on Netflix. So All Quiet on the Western Front is a German film that is based off the 1929 novel of the same name. We have had adaptations of this film before, particularly in the 30s and again in the 70s, and I do feel like this movie really does represent what the book was really about and really holds justice to those first films, especially the first one. This movie mainly revolves around a 17-year-old boy in Germany who forges his parents' signature so he can sign up for World War I, and this boy is named Paul, and he is played by Felix Kammerer. I think that he gives a phenomenal performance in this role. He has to play an individual who is this naive, kind of wide-eyed kid, essentially, who is feeding into all this nationalist propaganda. He wants to go fight for his country. He wants to be a hero. He wants to be a war hero. And suddenly he is faced with the horrors and the reality of what war really is, especially in World War I. And I think this movie is just gut punch after gut punch. And him playing someone who in the beginning you see as this like bright light, this very joyful individual, slowly seeing his like soul die and just playing that character and seeing the look on his face and his physical mannerisms change as the movie moves along. It was such a powerful performance and really powerful messaging, and I think everyone in this film did a fantastic job. The cinematography is also really well done. While it may not be on the same scale as what Deakins did in 1917, I do think it's comparable. I think the movie is such a huge scale, and being able to capture these big battles and some of the quiet moments when you're able to strip back away from after the big war scenes have happened and focus on the ravages of that war, seeing individuals going around collecting dog tags, looking after the wounded soldiers, and those really intense moments where you're not seeing gunfire and explosions, but kind of the violence of humanity, seeing it escape people. I think it has some of the most powerful imagery and symbolism of what war can be and how horrible it is and how brutal it is. Obviously, the themes of this novel still resonate today. It is almost 100 years since this novel came out, and some of the messages still hit home, and I think that's why this is a timeless story. The story of the masses going out and fighting for the few. You have, obviously, in this film, you're seeing the people that are in charge of these militaries kind of treating it like it's just a movement of pawns on a chessboard. But these are real people that are fighting in the trenches and going through these horrible experiences. And the movie does a fantastic job of conveying what it's like to deal with that reality, being forced in there and fighting for your life. It becomes a fight for survival, not a fight against the enemy. You're not fighting to necessarily beat the enemy anymore. You're fighting to not die. And I think it really drives that point home, especially in the moments where they're alone with each other and talking about their own experience. When I say this movie doesn't shy away from the brutality of war, it is a very graphic film. I didn't really expect that going into it. 1917 did have some graphic moments, but this movie continually puts you in the seat of these soldiers and seeing people being, ripped apart by munitions or crushed by tanks or just the horrible realities of what you see there and how that can affect a soldier. This movie does dive a lot into kind of the psychological effects of someone who sees these things and going from a kid in the beginning to this grizzled, experienced person in such a short amount of time. And I really think the movie ends in the perfect way. I will give some spoilers here because I have to talk about the end of the film. I think the end of the film is extraordinarily well done. So if you don't want to know anything about this movie, obviously this is a story that has existed for almost 100 years at this point. I definitely recommend you check this movie out. But I think the imagery of seeing everything come full circle for our main character by the end of the movie really hits home kind of the anonymous, brutal nature of war. Because earlier in the film, we see him going around collecting dog tags from wounded soldiers, again, driving that point home of just the massive loss of life and just the anonymous nature, and you kind of lose that when you're fighting these huge battles. And then by the end of the film, he's there having a young lieutenant come around and collect his dog tag, and kind of that messaging of, as important as you are as an individual in the scope of war, you could be lost to that, and we should focus on the people and their experiences, not necessarily those in power and the big overarching themes of each side of the war, but everyone that's on the ground experiencing and fighting in it for maybe their own personal reasons. Is at its core, All Quiet on the Western Front has always been a story that is fundamentally anti-war. It tells you the horrors of war, trying to avoid these things. Obviously, we didn't learn from it the first time this movie came out or the first time this story was told, because World War II happened after that. But it just shows you, especially in today's world with everything happening around the world, how terrible war is and how it should always be avoided, and how those in power tend to wield it in a way that they don't fully understand because they don't have to fight in the war. They don't have to experience the horrible brutality of being on the front lines. In the end of the film, There is some quick things where it's talking about the captions about what happened with the war and how many millions of people have died, how it was fought essentially over just a few hundred yards of land, just keeping fighting in just these horrible conditions over essentially nothing. And I really feel like people that watch this film can take away something that they're experiencing in today's world. We're seeing everything around the world where it feels like everything is building up to these same events that we experienced at the turn of the century. And it's really a fundamentally powerful film. I think the score also works really well. There is a use of this kind of almost synthetic like trumpet sound that plays in the beginning of some of the intense moments in the film, and it really drives home kind of the oppressive nature of being in this condition and having it kind of just keep coming back up and up when you think you're going to get out of it. It just keeps digging you deeper and deeper. There's some moments where our main character is trying to find happiness in some of the simple things in the world, whether it be some raw eggs or just having some warmth or just being away from battle for a short time, and it's constantly ripped away from him. And I think, like I said, that drives home this just visceral, animalistic nature of fighting in a war like this. I can't say enough about how good this movie is, and I definitely recommend you check it out. So if I were to rate All Quiet on the Western Front, I would give it a 10 out of 10. I think it is one of the best films of the year. It is currently my front runner to win Best Foreign Picture. These time-tested themes of war is hell, and that just kind of being put back in your face. Sometimes we forget about the horrible atrocities of the past because we're so fixated on the current time, but we can learn from those things if we remember just how bad they are, just not to repeat these things. They continually get repeated through history. And I feel like this movie is a good cautionary tale and just putting forward those themes and letting us understand how terrible it was. If you checked out All Quiet on the Western Front, let me know what you thought about it. Did you enjoy as much as I did? How does it compare to the original film for you? Have you read the original novel? What did you take away from it? So again, thanks for watching. Remember to like and subscribe, and see you guys next time.